Hi, I'm Jeremy Robinson, and this is the 19th hole. Hi, and welcome to the 7th episode of the 19th Hole Podcast. Today I'm delighted to welcome a former European Tour player, but more recently the world-renowned sports agent, Andrew Chubby Chandler. Chub, thanks very much for joining us today.
Yeah, good to see you, J-Rob. After all these pandemics, this is the only way you meet people anymore, isn't
it? Yeah, I know. So if we just roll back the years a little bit, prior to you becoming an agent, obviously you played on the tour for quite a long time. 1974, you turned pro?
Yeah. I turned pro in about October 74. And you probably remember the rules were pretty antiquated then. You weren't allowed to win any money for 6 months when you turned pro.
Wow.
So you had to serve a 6-month period before you could actually take the money. You could have the finish, but you couldn't take the money. And so everybody turned pro in October, so that when the tour started in April, you could start taking money.
Right.
That was if you were good enough to win the money. I wasn't good enough to win the money. And I played, my first tournament was Italian Open in Venice at the Lido Golf Club, and it was the same week that Seve made his debut on tour. And I don't think Seve had ever played outside Spain. I think he played a couple of Spanish PGA events, but this was the first time he played European Tour and outside Spain. And from that moment, our careers set off in totally different directions. And it was actually, looking back on it, a privilege to play the time I did. I played for 15 years, but it was in the years of Woozy, it was in the years of Faldo, it was in the years of Seve, Langer. They were all at the height, Sandy. And looking back, it was to have that many superstars around at one time was amazing. And I only ever played 9 holes with Seve, and it was a practice round. And I remember absolutely shaking. Because you always felt, and you probably had the same feeling, you always felt as though you're a bit under the microscope. And I remember playing 9 holes with him in Madrid, and that was almost one of the highlights of my career. You know what I mean? Playing 9-hole practice with Seve. Yeah. And looking back at old videos of Seve and the stuff that comes up on social media, you don't realise what a massive star he was.
No. I mean, it's interesting you say those names really were the guys who built the European Tour player-wise, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, John Jacobs started it in 72, didn't he? And then these people came along and helped him build it. Mm. I think Faldo turned pro in 77. Seve, obviously, 74. Langer was probably about the same time as me, because I played with Langer in the winter of 76 down at a place called El Paraiso in southern Spain. And I stayed there for 2 months free, but had to play with hotel guests, which was a nice deal. And about 3 times a week, we had a roll-up with about 12 of us down at Las Brisas. And I was the second best player. And Bernard was the first. And out of about, I don't know, 15 times we played, he probably won 12 and I won 3. Mm. But he was exceptional then. And then played through the years, he couldn't putt at all. I played with him in Sweden in the late 70s, and he actually hit it off a green with a putter. Wow. He was so bad. Mm. And it's quite amazing that he's managed to build a career and putt like he does. Mm. I mean, he actually puts really good now.
Yeah, well, when we were talking recently with Steve Richardson, we were saying it's just amazing. I mean, at the age of 64, how he still goes to the gym, he still does this, and he still loves it, and he still plays golf to an incredible standard.
Don't you do that?
Well, I'm not 64, but I don't think I'll be doing that when I'm 64.
and you wouldn't catch me in the gym either.
No. So moving on from that, you probably don't remember talking about shaking, but I do remember shaking when I played with you at the Open in Turnberry in 1986. That was the first one I played in. I qualified as an amateur. You probably wouldn't remember it, but I remember we played together in the first 2 rounds.
I do remember.
And we played with Jerry Anderson from Canada.
Yeah, little Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry was quite a character.
Yeah,
and
yeah, he was.
I remember he had his brother on the bag as well, caddying for. I do remember playing that year at Turnberry, and I just remember Greg Norman won it, if you remember, and he shot 63 in the second round. And to this day, it was one of the greatest rounds of golf I've ever seen, when you're actually at the venue and you know how hard the course is playing.
Yeah, I played 7 Opens, and that was the only one I was ever exempt for.
Yeah,
because I played really well early, and I remember being exempt for it. And it is such a different. It was in those days. You remember we had 36-hole qualifying on the Sunday and Monday, and if you qualified, you actually felt you'd won the tournament. So it was actually a problem getting yourself up to tee off on the Thursday because you'd already done it all. And I remember that year I actually played better in the Open that year because I was exempt and I could sort of prepare properly. But I did a comparison article. I didn't do it, but the Mail did it. I can't remember who did it. Might have been Ian Wooldridge, maybe. But they did a comparison article with me and Tom Watson. And it was sort of, so far, how much have you won? 4,000. I'm getting mixed up. I think this is 77. But they did this article, and it was sort of, Tom Watson, how much have you won? 1.5 million so far. How much have you won, Chubby? I've won 4,000 quid. Where are you staying, Chubby? £4 bed and breakfast. Where are you staying, Tom? Got the best suite in the Turnberry Hotel. And it went down like that. And the only reason I agreed to do it was if I could play 9 holes in practice with Watson, which I did. And I'd never seen anybody play like that. Never. It was quite amazing.
Yeah. But as I say, I remember playing in that Open, the Open in '86 at Turnberry with you, and the course was brutally difficult, if you remember, and the weather was awful. But I remember Gordon Brand Senior, I think, finished second.
Yeah.
But Greg Norman won it, and obviously, for me, it was a great experience. My first Open as an amateur, etc. And I loved every minute of it, although I found it a bit tricky, I've got to say.
You don't remember me 4-putting the 6th, do you?
I remember the 6-hole, but the one thing I do remember, Chubby, I remember hitting an iron off the first and my legs were shaking. We get down there, my ball was next to Jerry Anderson's ball. And so he hit first and he hit this shot and it was going straight at the flag. And I said, it looks good. And he totally misjudged the club, and it flew the green, it flew the crowd, and it went over the fence at the back.
That's right, I remember that.
And I never said another word to him in 36 holes after that. I thought, I don't say a word. But anyway, so moving on from that, when did the idea and how did the concept of becoming a sports or creating a sports management company, how did it kind of happen?
Well, I played reasonably in 85. I played well in 86. Finished 42nd in the money list for 86. That was my best finish. Then I played okay 87. Then I lost my card in 88. And I went into 89 with enough status to play about 10 or 12 events and knew a couple of guys for invites and whatever. But started out that year in 89 and didn't really have enough chances to play and didn't really enjoy it. And I always knew about a thing called PR, but I didn't know what PR stood for, and I didn't know whether I could do it, but I figured that I might be all right at that. Anyway, the year went on, and a friend of mine, Mike Parker, who actually wanted to sponsor me in 89. And I said, no, I'm not your man. I'm not playing enough, and I'm sort of fading away. I said, but what I will do, I'd done corporate work for him in South Africa. And I said, what I will do, I will run the program that you want to do, and I'll find you a couple of guys to sponsor. So I found, at the end of that year, I found Carl Mason and Phil Harrison, and they wore an ICI logo on their sleeve. Right. And they played with Japanese businessmen usually, because it was ICI colours and dials. And we put on the program, I did the reservations, I ran the days, whatever. And that was really the start of my company, because I had to get 2 players sponsored by it. I went to the European Open in 89 in September. I think Andrew Murray won it. And I went there and I've just signed up 4 or 5 of my mates and said, I'm starting this management company and it's going to be called International Sports Management. And it was David Jones, Carl Mason, Phil Harrison, Dennis Durnian, David Jones for a little while, but 5 or 6. So yeah, it was that was the start. It was a very low level start. I went and got 10 grand overdraft from NatWest.
Yeah. But at the time, really, there was only correct me if I'm wrong, but really there was only IMG. And I remember when I turned pro, I actually turned pro under IMG in '87, but they seemed to have a bit of a monopoly on the European tour.
There was Derek Pillage as well.
Right.
You remember Derek Pillage?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
So he had his management company, and that was built around a deal with British Caledonian Airways, and they were called the British Caledonian Lions, and they played all over Africa, East Africa, where BCal used to fly to. And he had quite a strong setup, and I was dying to be managed by him. You know, Carl Mason was managed by him, and he didn't want me. We laugh about it because, you know, he said, "You really wanted me to manage it?" I said, "Yeah, I did." So, but you didn't want me. So in the end, I started my own company so I could do it, sort of.
Mm-hmm. But as I say, at the time, IMG were pretty strong, weren't they?
Very, yeah. And they did almost have a monopoly.
Yeah. So other people getting into the marketplace wasn't a bad thing, really.
No, and it was pretty easy for me because we were different. I was the only guy that played golf for a start off. So you got IMG that were, with respect to them, lawyers and accountants, and then you got ISM that was a player. And it wasn't that difficult to sort of convince people that we were going to be a good alternative.
Mm-hmm. So you obviously had Mace and those boys, Phil Harrison and the kind of those guys. Darren Clarke was the first kind of major signing then, was he?
Darren was the first guy that I hadn't played with.
Right.
And I got a call. I got a call from a friend of mine in Dublin, Dougie Heather, and he said, "I've got a young lad here. He wants to meet somebody like you to know whether he should turn pro now or not, or wait a year for the Walker Cup at Portmarnock." And I went over to Dublin to meet him on a Monday, and Dougie had said to me, he said, "Well, that Monday he just won the Irish Championship." And he actually won the Irish Championship, and he beat everybody 4-3 or bigger. It was just crazy. He was obviously very good. And he turned up in the middle of August in a long cashmere boss overcoat, which I didn't realise sort of signified the future. And we spoke for about an hour, and he said at the end of the hour, I was pointing out he wouldn't get particularly bigger contracts, he wouldn't get particularly more invites, but you will be a better player in a year's time if you turn pro. And he took that on board, and after an hour he says, right, I just want to play golf. Can you do everything else? I do that in a Darren Clarke accent normally. And I said, you know, obviously I'm not going to say no. So I said yes. And then he said, what about a contract? And I said, well, Arnold Palmer and Mark McCormack never had one. They just had a big handshake, and that's what they worked on. Right, that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. And that was the start of it. And he actually signed to be managed by us before I'd ever played with him. But when I went and played with him about a week later, he came over to Mere, where our office was based. And I played with him. And after about 6 holes, I thought, oh, we've got a future here. Yeah. And he really was that good. And I said to a lot of people that there were very few people intimidated me on a golf course because I was reasonable. You played me when probably I was playing as good as I played in '86. I was decent. If I had me managing, you know, if I had me now managing me, then I would have been a good player. But I didn't have any real guidance in the pro game. And he when I played this round of golf with him, he intimidated me. You know, he hit a 3-iron 220 yards through the air, coming down, landing soft, and I couldn't do that. And in my whole time playing, there were only 2 people that really intimidated me, apart from Sevi's presence intimidated. But actually hitting wise, Sandy Lyle was the other. And Sandy, you know, I remember playing at the Wentworth in the Martini or something like that. And I remember him just getting on the third tee, and I drove it down there, and he just had his Morton Knight waterproof jacket. And for people not old enough to know what Morton Knight was, they were cloth waterproofs. They were proper clothy jacket. And he had it unzipped. He threw the one iron on the deck and hit it 20 yards past me. And I thought, I can't compete with that. That's ridiculous. I'm bursting the driver and not getting near his iron.
Yeah,
so he was the other one that really intimidated me. But I finished with my day with Darren. I thought, right, we've got a future here. And it was great because the other people we managed, I played with, they didn't need any mentoring and advice, but Darren needed lots. And that's how it started. And that really was the model for a long, long time, because I was the only guy that would actually take a young kid and tell him what was going to happen, how it was going to be. And it was, he made the company without any doubt.
Yeah, and it's nice that, you guys are still doing it to this day, really, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't do a lot for him because he plays the Champions Tour. And funnily enough, now the best salesman for Darren Clarke is Darren Clarke.
Yeah.
He plays every week in a pro-am. He plays with the CEO or CEO, and he's there with them, and he knows what to say and he knows what to do. And he's just got 2 very big corporate contracts from people he's played with in pro-ams. And he rings up and says, is this a good deal? Is that a good deal? How many days should it be? And you tell him, and he says, right, I've got 175 grand for that. And yeah, well, you've done better than I would do.
Yeah.
But he really does sell himself quite well now.
Yeah. So he came along, and then the next one, Lee Westwood was the next one, was he?
No, there were 2 or 3 from that Walker Cup. Andrew Coulthard.
Right.
Paul McGinley.
Okay, yeah.
So, there were a few before Lee. And that, to follow on from the Darren story, we actually went to the Walker Cup he missed as guests of Dougie, the guy that introduced us. And Darren being Darren, I think on the first morning, we came in for lunch, and he had about 8 pints of Guinness with his lunch. And we're watching the golf in the afternoon, and somebody topped it, but I can't remember who it was. Mickelson was playing, but I don't think it was Mickelson. And he turned to me and he says, Chub, you're right. They look like a bunch of amateurs. And he'll always remember it. And it was very typical Darren, that's how he was. And he went to the tour school. He got number 36 card. He came back in 32 to get his card when there were 50 cards. He was obviously special.
So that was, as you say, the other ones came along, and then kind of...
Yeah, Lee came along about 5 years later, about 95, I think.
Right. So he was obviously another one that, went on to great things, was a great player and everything. And did you see the potential in him straight away or not?
Yeah, he was a very good striker. His swing is a little different, and it was then, it is now.
Yeah.
But he was a very good striker, very confident lad, really confident. And I remember his dad ringing me up saying, we've seen what you've done with Darren Clarke. Would you like to come and have a chat with us? My son's going to turn pro. And I went over, and Lee's mum made us tea and biscuits. And Dad put on a video of his son playing. Well, nobody did that then. You know what I mean? That videos were antiquated things, but he got videos of his son swinging and saying, well, this is how he plays, and etc., etc. But he was different to Darren. He wasn't overwhelmingly good. He was just a good, solid player. You could see that he got what it needed, and he had an unbelievable attitude.
No, I remember that. Yeah, he had utmost belief in his own ability, didn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and he was very simplistic too. I remember him leading the Italian Open by about 3 in the last round, about 1996, I think. And he played a bit of a risky shot, and it didn't come off, and he made 8,
right.
Quad. And he didn't win, he finished second. And I said, we were talking about it. I said, well, I won't do that again, will I? That's how he viewed it. I made a mistake, but I won't do that again. And of course, he turned into for 4 years, a ridiculous winner. He won 25 times, I think, in 4 years. And there was another ridiculous stat. About 11 of those were playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't win those, you're not actually that good a player, are you? Playoffs are massive.
Yeah.
At the time, they don't think anything. They say, oh, well, you finished second, it's fine. But actually, when you're chalking up wins instead of seconds, it's massive. Absolutely massive.
So 25 wins. I mean, and he had loads of wins overall in his career, and he had actually quite a few more wins than Darren, didn't he?
Yeah.
So would you say
Darren wasn't a closer?
No.
Darren, I keep telling you stories. I went to the late 90s. I went to the European Open for the weekend, and it was finishing on a Monday because it was a bank holiday in Ireland. And Darren was leading by 5. I think it was the year he'd shot 60 in the first round, and at K Club, and he's leading by 5. And I went over, got an early flight on Monday, and I went over and wandering up and down the range, and Darren's working with that little Belgian psychologist, Jos van Stipholt.
Yeah.
And bless his soul, he passed away about 4 or 5 years ago, but Jos was a very strange psychologist, and he used to jab people in the ribs and tell them this, and tell them that. And I thought, he's 5 ahead. He don't need firing up. He needs calming down. But he was revving him up. And I went along and I stood over Westwood, and without looking up and looking at me, he just said, "Might be an interesting day for you, this, Chub." Well, after 5 holes, he was 1 ahead.
Was he really? Yeah.
He got out. He was 3 under after 5, and Darren was 3 over after 5. Well, something like that. But he was leading the tournament, and Lee won, and Darren lost. And it was like that. It was a win and a lose. And it's interesting because people said, "Well, how do you deal with that?" Well, you don't go to the winner because he's fine. He can celebrate. It's the loser you need to get in a car and out of there quick. But yeah, they had great careers together in parallel for a long time.
One of them maybe overachieved and the other one underachieved, you would suggest, or not?
I would say one of them underachieved.
Yeah.
I think to have the gift of being able to win tournaments is a fantastic gift to have.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that's an overachievement. It's just a facet of the game that not everybody possesses. Darren, to this day, has probably had a lingering thought that he was an underachiever because he was so good.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2000, 2001, he was a better player than Tiger. He completely out-golfed Tiger in the World Match Play final in 2000. I mean, you've never seen anything like it. He hit it inside Tiger 26 times out of 33 or something. It was just crazy golf. But you know what it's like, J-Rob, that not everybody's got all the facets in line.
Yeah.
And what made Lee good wasn't the same stuff that Darren was good. Darren in those days just overpowered golf courses. He was just very, very good. I mean, he would often go out in the last round in 40th place and finish 4th. He'd shoot 63 in the last round. And a lot of good players have made their career like that. Ernie's one. Ernie's got scooped up loads of world ranking points when he was at his prime that he shouldn't have got, but by doing 64 in the last round and going from 25 to 3rd. Yeah.
So that was Darren and Lee, and then obviously you had some other great players. You had the so-called Managers Grand Slam at one point. I remember it.
I never won the PGA.
Oh, didn't you?
When I say I was never involved in a winner with the PGA. We won 4 out of 5.
Oh, I thought you had. Sorry.
No, we won 4 out of 5. The press was saying, could we do it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the press was saying, but we never did it. The US PGA. Who else didn't win the US PGA? Was it Arnie or something like that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, we're in good company now.
Yeah. So, and then obviously Rory came along, and
well, you missed 2 out.
Go on then.
You missed 2 out. Charles Schwartz and Louis Oosthuizen came before Rory, and that came from my playing days in South Africa. I got my nickname in South Africa. I went out, some people called me Chubby in England. I went to South Africa and everybody called me Chubby. And that's how I became Chubby. And I was trying to help young South Africans a bit by getting them all. We got them over to play in Europe and looked after them. Lytham Trophy, Brabazon, Irish stroke play. They came for about a 6-week spell, and I actually had one guy look after them. They had a minibus, and they were like a rock band on tour. And they went around, and this guy caddied for one of them each week, and it was Charles and Louis were two of them. And that was 2002, 3, something like that. So when they came through and win that, they'd been with us a lot longer than Rory. Rory came in 2007. He turned pro straight after the Walker Cup, and he finished the Walker Cup on the Sunday night, and they lost by half a point to Dustin Johnson and Ricky Fowler, and it was an amazing team. And he then shot off down to the Titherington for Section 1 of the European Tour School, and then he actually officially turned pro on the Tuesday at the British Masters, Quinn British Masters maybe it was, and Quinn Direct, and he turned pro there. But it was great because we knew what day he was turning pro, so we had his clothing done, his hat, his club contract, his bag. It was just an easy thing to do, and I think he finished 32nd in the first week. And the second week he played in the Dunhill with a horse trainer friend of mine, Mike DeCott, and I was playing with Lee. And it was in the days you played 3 rounds together, and then last round was on its own. And Rory actually got his card there. He finished 3rd, and that was his card. But it was interesting to play with him in a tournament where he actually got his card.
Mm-hmm. Was he the best player, do you think, you've managed, as in golfing complete game?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
it'd be close between him and Darren. When Darren was at his best, he was as good as Rory, but Rory was 18.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it's still to this day. I think when Rory plays his best, he takes a lot. There aren't many people who are playing the game today who can beat him.
I don't think there's anybody.
No.
I think he's got more talent than anybody out there. And
arguably he's the best player in the world when he plays well. Still, it'd be great to see him win another major or two. That is for sure.
Yeah, well, his game flows, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
He has a game that we all want.
Well, everybody enjoys watching him, don't they? I mean, especially when he's driving the ball and he's in full flow. It's just, it's just great to watch him, really. And there aren't many people who can swing it as well as he can and hit it as far with such ease.
Don't you think he's interesting to watch because he's fallible?
Yeah, I just...
You know what I mean? I think it's fun to watch because you're not quite sure what's going to happen. He's always had a miss from 3 feet in him.
Oh, yeah.
That almost makes it more interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I mean, I love watching him play when he's playing well. That last round he had at Bay Hill a couple of years ago when he won. When he's playing his best, it's impressive to watch.
It is.
So just moving on then. Events came along as well. So obviously the players. You did the British Masters, didn't you? And
yeah, we did. We did some senior events in the 90s. We did one at Half Moon Bay in Jamaica.
Right.
We did one in a lovely hotel in southern Spain, the seniors match play. So we dabbled then we got a chance to do the British Masters at Forest of Arden in, I think, 2004, 5 and 6 at the Forest of Arden.
And those were... It's not easy running events, as you and I both know. So finding the sponsors, but they were good events you put on, weren't they?
Yeah, well, they should be. If you think about what experience I've had, I've been to every big golf tournament in the world, and I've seen all the good things and all the bad things. Yeah. So you know what it's like. You pick out things that you think work there, and think, oh, I'll do that. So I always had this theory that if we looked after the caddies, the players would like it, because the caddies would be telling the players what a wonderful week it was. And it definitely works. And even last week at the Belfry, I went to the Belfry, and 2 or 3 caddies said, you started us being looked after well. And we used to have them in the Bel Air, And last week they had the caddy lounge was the Bel Air, and it's interesting, isn't it? I think, you know, when you're doing stuff in tournaments, you look after the wives and the caddies. The players tend to get brainwashed by both of them that, you know, whatever's going on, that's a good week. But I enjoy it, and you know, I saw when we were in Japan one year, and it was a shotgun start in the Pro-Am, they set off a massive flare. Well, I'd never seen that, you know what I mean? This big red flare went up in the air. And I'm at JCB Club right now, and we're doing a seniors event here in July, and we're going to have a yellow flag up for the start of the Pro-Am. Same idea, but I've seen somebody say that's a great idea. Yeah, I've just nicked it.
So, Chub, talking about events and everything, and obviously you're going to be doing the seniors tour events at the JCB Club and shotgun starts and that. That kind of leads me to the new tournaments that are being talked about, the live events backed by the Saudi money and Greg Norman fronting them. In your opinion, is there room for another tour of these kind of tournaments, and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I knew you'd ask me this, and it's.
I mean, it's the topic of conversation. It's everybody's topic of conversation.
Everywhere. The Belfry last week, everybody was just talking about Saudi golf.
Yeah. And
I suppose in a way, they've already achieved some of what they were trying to do, because they've got massive coverage from it. I have no real one way of looking at it, because I think part of me thinks that if I'm at JCB right now, if a company started up with a lot of money and started making better diggers, good diggers, as good as JCB, would anybody stop them? No. You know what I mean? It is just competition. And it makes you feel as though the PGA Tour and the European Tour have a bit of a monopoly on things if they're not going to let anybody come in. I mean, the reason nobody opposes the Clutch Tour or the Europro Tour is because it's not as big as the European Tour. But if the Clutch Tour suddenly started playing for $1.5 million a week, they wouldn't like that either. So it's really difficult. And then you see the point of view from the European Tour and the PGA Tour that they have to protect what they've got. And in a way, they're protecting it for the players. You know, there was a lot of talk last week that if this Saudi thing affects the European Tour that bad, it'll go back to playing for $750,000 a week. Well, I get that, but you can't criticize people like Westy, who's obviously signed up for an awful lot of cash, probably as much profit as he's made in his career. You know, that's the sort of numbers they're talking about. And I'm a bit betwixt and between. And the problem is too, you know, I try and help young guys to make their mind up what to do. And I actually don't know what to tell them to do either, because if you look at it, the pathway to go from, say, the MENA Tour to the Asian Tour to the Asian International Series to the live events is actually probably easier than going from the Europro Tour, well, to get on the Europro Tour, then the Europro Tour to the Challenge Tour to the European Tour to the PGA Tour. Because don't forget, this isn't going to affect a lot of people, but it affects them by association. So, you know, some average player on the European Tour will be affected because the prize money might go down. But it's very difficult to try and work out who's right, who's wrong, what should happen, what shouldn't. What I do think, and I'm absolutely amazed, is that they didn't manage to sit down together and sort something out that worked for everybody, because I've got a feeling you and I could have done that.
That was the point I was going to make, really, and I've discussed with the other people, because I personally, I mean, you say the prize money might go down, but you remember when the World Championship events came along, and Ken Schofield said this will pull up the smaller tournaments in prize money, make them bigger, and a lot of people at the time didn't think that was correct, but he was right, wasn't he?
He was right, and the shame of the World Golf Championships were that they got taken over by the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
You know, I remember 15 years ago, 20 years ago, going to one, and I used to have to get special accreditation for the week because the PGA Tour accreditation worked, but nobody else's did. So it was all driven by the PGA Tour. but it was all PGA Tour money. It was all American money. And it was, that they were the TV deals. So it's very difficult to work out what's right and what's wrong and what's been right and what's been wrong. I think if they still had the 4 World Golf Championships, the world would be a better place.
But don't you think that, with all this money supposedly coming into the game from them and from the Premier Golf League as well, possibly, surely if everybody, as you rightly say, sat down in a room and had a normal discussion like normal people do, then surely this could benefit hundreds of players. There's a lot more golfers these days trying to become pros. It could benefit the grassroots of the game, which everybody always talks about. I mean, surely with this amount of money, it's going to filter down a little bit.
I agree. I think I can't believe that Jay Monahan never met them, ever.
Yeah.
I know Keith did. Keith Pelly did meet them in Malta. There seems to be a bit of conjecture whether the Saudis actually offered them a chunk of money or didn't. One side said they did and one side said they didn't. But, to me, to create what they're doing, to be able to do that as part of the European Tour, wouldn't have been that difficult, If you're talking 8 events, you put those 8 $25 million events, the same week you play for $3 million as a regular tournament, the regular members gain by the $3 million event, and the top players get somewhere to play in official, because that's the problem. The thing with the Saudi thing, one of the places it seems to fall down a bit to me, is that they use the world rankings as a criteria to get in, but by doing the events they haven't got world ranking points for the events. So you're playing one of those, you miss an event that has world ranking points, so your world ranking will go down. And yet they're using that as a criteria to play, which I don't understand. They're creating a situation where people can't win world ranking points, but yet using that system to work out who are the best players, which doesn't seem right.
So, obviously the first, the Asian Tour have thrown in this event at Slaley Hall as well, which is an interesting kind of maneuver they've made, isn't it? But it just seems like I can't get my head around it, that they can't kind of get together and work it out. So on that basis, Chubb, in 2 years' time, in your opinion, where do you think we're going to be with all this?
I think there'll be a very good Saudi Golf League. I think they're aiming for 2024. I think that this is all preempting being able to show what they can do, show where the money is. You talk to the Saudis, one of the things they want, Greg seems to think 350th in the world rankings would be a good winning. One of the Saudis, Majid, that's big involved, said 500th. He said, if the 500th golfer in the world rankings wins $4 million at Centurion, we'll be delighted. And then he said, because that would make everybody turn around and think, well, what am I doing? And the interesting thing, I think there's probably 3 people it really suits, really fits well with. One's Phil, even though he managed to nearly mess it up, as only Phil could. One's Westy, 49 and 3 months or whatever he is, probably got 2 or 3 years at a good level, but, suddenly been handed a big chunk of money to go and play enough tournaments a year. And Richard Bland, who we look after, and who's 49 and a half. And he's been rewarded for his good golf of the last 18 months by being offered a place in these Saudi fields. And, he's going to play hopefully 8 times this year for $25 million 7 times and $50 million once. So, that's his reward for playing, man.
And you literally cannot blame any of those players. I mean, when Westwood was interviewed the other day on Sky, and you look down Twitter afterwards, and people going on and on about what he's doing wrong and this and that. But the bloke's been a legend of the European Tour, and he's supported the European Tour. And as he rightly said, he wasn't one of those guys who just went to America. Well, he did go and live in America, but he really played the European Tour first and the PGA Tour second, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
And where the other guys have been the other way round. So you can't blame Westwood. And when the tour talk about banning players and he can't become Ryder Cup captain, they can't do this, I just think it's such a shame.
Yeah, I thought he spoke very well last week.
I did, yeah.
I thought, you know, he's the first guy that's actually come out with an honest appraisal of the situation, and, you know, fronted everybody up and said, well, I'm doing it for the money. Yeah. You know, that's what it is. Yeah. And I would think him not turning down the Ryder Cup captaincy probably has something to do with it. I think he was a lot for the Ryder Cup captaincy, and he said, you know, I want to carry on playing. Well, he wants to carry on playing for 25 million. Of course he does.
Well, I think personally, Chubb, I think at the end of the day, you know, Lee Westwood has played in however many Ryder Cups and has got, you know, so many points, etc., as has Garcia and Poulter. And if they're not Ryder Cup captains at the end of the day, they're still legends of the Ryder Cup, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, whether they're captain or whether they're not, they're still some of the greatest players who've played in the Ryder Cup, and their records speak for themselves.
Yeah, and I think it'd be really interesting after 3 or 4 of these events how people view the guys that are playing, because it'd be sad if they were treated as outcasts. You know, their records there, they made the European tour through the 90s. So
I couldn't agree more. I'm sorry to interrupt you on that one, because I totally agree. But don't you feel at the moment the kind of European Tour and the PGA Tour are trying to create these players as being outcasts?
Oh yeah, they're ostracizing.
Yeah,
and you know, there's a bit of scaremongering going on younger players, and a bit of scaremongering going on older players. That, you know, if you do this, the European Tour will be no more, etc., etc. But you know, it'd be nice to know what's going to happen in 3 years' time, and I have to think it's going to get sorted out somehow.
Well, I would hope so. I mean, we've got a player who's got an invite actually to Slaley Hall, and we're not sure. He basically plays on the Challenge Tour, but he's a full member of the main tour as well, because he won on the Challenge Tour last year. But there's talk he might not get a release to Slaley Hall. Well, he's never had an invite on the European Tour. They've never given him an invite, and now they're trying to stop him playing one event for $2 million. To me, it's just totally unfair. Yeah, this guy has played the European Tour. He's been on the tour, off the tour, Challenge Tour. Never said a bad word about the European Tour, and he's just asking for one release.
Yeah, I think if we work for the European Tour, we view it differently, though.
Well, yeah.
You know, there's 2 sides to the story, isn't there? And I can understand totally both sides. What I don't understand is the PGA Tour's stance when Jay's never sat down and met with them. I think that's a very odd situation when they've got $2 billion to invest into golf, and you know he didn't want to talk to him. Well, that's to me a bit small.
Yeah. So, right or wrong, then, in 3 years' time, will the majors and the PGA Tour, will they ban some of these players from playing?
I think, as ever, the Masters have it right, because they'll just not invite people.
Yeah.
So they won't ban anybody. You just won't get that lovely invitation in the post.
Do you think they'll go down that? Do you think they'll go down that route then, and not invite people who play in the Saudi events?
I think they'll do that for a while, for sure. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, because if ever you wanted to be a fly on the wall, you wanted to be a fly on the Saudis' wall and the PGA Tour's wall for the last 18 months, and if you really wanted to make money, you should be a lawyer on either side, because there's no doubt they're going to make fortunes.
Yeah.
Because I think the Saudi angle now is to go forward with everything, and then let's decide in court, and we've got more oil than you've got. That's my guess. And I have to think that both sides have got conflicting opinions from their legal teams, because I can't think that the Saudis can go forward knowing that everybody's going to get banned. And I don't think the PGA Tour, they think they're in the right. So they're obviously getting completely different opinions from their legal teams, which is, at the end of the day, I've been divorced, and that's exactly what happens in a divorce. The 2 lawyers actually build up a case against each other, whether there's one there or not, to make sure they get big fees. And I think the legal teams will do the same. And there'll be millions and millions of dollars spent legal. But how it turns out in the end, I've no idea.
Because surely the Saudis really have got nothing to lose. If they lose out on it and in 2 or 3 years' time it doesn't happen, they'll just kind of walk away from it and maybe go to another sport. But the PGA Tour, obviously, and golf as a whole, has, in my opinion, got a lot more to lose.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that 5 years' time, there might not be a Saudi Golf League, or the Saudi Golf League might be the IPL of golf.
Yeah,
and I mean, I'm a cricket lover. I love watching the IPL. I love the top players just biffing it out the ground every other ball. It's just fantastic entertainment, and that's what they're trying to create. The 54-hole events, they are shotgun starts. So, there's no chance of people getting the draw that we got at 7 o'clock at Turnberry and playing before the wind got up. There's none of that. All the people are going to be playing at the same time, which is interesting.
Well, I couldn't agree more on the IPL. I love cricket as well, and I like all forms of the game. But I love watching the IPL and the T20 and these new games. They're taking cricket to a different level. Yeah.
And you just treat that they are different games. You just treat them differently, don't you?
Different games, but it kind of seems a bit the same as at the time the ECB didn't want any of the England players playing in the IPL, did they? And they kind of banned them. And now they encourage them to go and play because England want to win the T20.
And it improves their skills, and they're being mentored by people like Muralitha and Ricky Ponting, whatever.
And I just think, personally, from my kind of looking at it, and for young players, and I just hope that the PGA Tour, the European Tour, and the bodies of golf and the Saudis, they get together and sort something out for the good of the game. But in the end of the day, I mean, I know you say, obviously you're right, the lawyers are going to be the winners, but golf in a overall is going to be the loser, isn't it? If the best players in the world aren't playing in the majors.
Yeah. Somehow they've got to keep the majors sacrosanct somehow.
Yeah, I agree.
Just like they do with a test series between England, Australia, things like that.
Yeah, I agree.
But how they get there, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And at the moment, there's two very strong wills going against each other, and the players are going to be in the middle, and some players are going to make a load of cash, and sort of been discussing it with Blandy, and sort of we said he was talking about, it'll affect the Champions Tour career. I said, yeah, but you're going to make so much money in 2 years in the Saudi thing. The Champions career will be insignificant.
Well, there's no guarantee he gets on the Champions Tour, is it?
That's right, none at all.
Blandy's not exempt on the Champions Tour.
Not at all. He'd have to go get a card and stay in the States on the off chance he gets in. This is a very nice way to make your bank manager happy.
Oh, yeah. So moving on from that, so just to finish off and say thanks a lot for coming on, but a couple of more questions that I've asked the other boys who've been on. What's your favourite course as a player, from a player's point of view, the favourite course you've played on?
Favourite golf course to play? Do I turn it back to when I could play?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. That was the idea of the question. Yeah.
In Britain, my two favourites, and I don't think you can compare links to inland. So I have Royal Birkdale and Sunningdale Old. In America, Pine Valley would be up there. And my favourite golf experience, JCB is very close to it. might even be, but if not, Shadow Creek in Las Vegas.
Right. But Sunningdale Old, I would agree with you. It's just some place that.
Yeah, so, great walk.
The next two questions, you don't have to answer them if you don't want, but the hardest player that you've had to manage, the hardest one to deal with.
Without doubt, Darren.
Right.
Without doubt, Darren.
Yeah.
He'd know that.
In a nice way, though.
In a nice way. And his standards were very high, and you knew that if you could make him happy, then everybody else would be happy. So he was definitely the hardest.
Okay. And then on the flip side of that, who was the easiest player to manage?
Oh, a few of those. Rory was pretty easy.
Oh, right.
Rory,
okay.
The two South African lads were pretty easy.
Yeah.
McGinley was easy. Matt Wallace pretty easy. Most of them are reasonable. I think our jobs got more difficult, without any doubt, partly because of competition, partly because of COVID and guys learning to do stuff for themselves, and partly because they're an entitled generation now. So, you know, you'll have come across the young guy that comes and sits across your desk and asks for, how much money are you going to get me? I want 50 grand. If you don't get me 50 grand, they're not signing. And I want 7 guaranteed challenge touchdowns. Well, they've forgotten that they got to shoot 65. You know what I mean? Doesn't matter how many invitations you get them, unless they use them, they're useless. And it's amazing how, you know, a young kid will play really well, you know, shoot 64 in the first round of a minor tournament, and then think, oh, and he rings Chubby up to see if he can have an invite to the main tour next week because they've cracked it. And then, you know, then by the end of the week, he's made 160 quid, and it's you know, it's gone.
Sounds like you had the same bloke asking the same questions that I've had.
Yeah, well, I think they're all. It's a generational thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is.
It's entitlement and social media does it a lot. I think, you know, these lads, all the boys you were talking about, the all turn pro now, they're looking at social media and seeing that, you know, Poulter's got Ferraris coming out of his ears, and, you know, he's going there in a private plane, and, you know, and sometimes not stars doing it. You know, it's not the sort of run of the mill PGA Tour player that's only making about $4 million a year is actually flying privately, and, you know, he's got his nice house and car and whatever. You know, the young kids see that and they're living the dream, but the trouble is they've got to back it up. They've absolutely got to back it up. And, you know, my feeling about the current generation now, there's very few young golfers that are tough enough to make it. You know, I do a lot of audio books now, started listening to audio books since the start of COVID. I've done about 56 or 7. And you listen to a Ronaldo biography and you realize how much work's actually gone into what he is. I'm not sure golfers do that. You know, there's a lot of golfers, pro golfers, allowed to come and play here. There's nobody practicing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think they work hard enough, but I actually don't think they do. I don't think they actually combine mental training and desire. I'm not sure they all have the desire to do it. They want it, but they don't actually want to do everything to do it. You know, they're not prepared to make the sacrifices. So I don't know.
Interesting. So, a couple more. Finally, the most memorable experience you've had as an agent, really.
Pretty easy, that.
It is easy. Go on then.
Darren winning the Open.
I was going to say, would it be? Yeah.
That has to. I mean, I've had some great moments, and I've really enjoyed what I do.
Yeah.
And obviously, winning the 2 Masters, Charles Schwartzel and Danny Willett. Danny was better in a way than Charles, because Charles was tinged with Rory not winning. So we had the situation where Rory had that horrendous last day, and Charles birdied the last 4 to win. But to actually have our house with a few friends and clients there in Augusta and have the guy with the green blazer come back to and have a drink and a food with us was pretty special. When Danny won, I was actually sat with him when he won. Right. Because, you know, it actually depended on Jordan Spieth actually not holding his second shot on the last or something. So, you know, we're actually sitting there, and he actually won the tournament while we were together. And there was no sadness involved because, you know, there was nobody chucked it away. So and he came back to the house, and we had Sir Alex there. Right. And Sir Alex had a large bet on Spieth on the back nine, and he'd had a few wines, and there was some quite interesting conversations going on. But I mean, I've been so lucky to sort of be involved in all that. And like I say, when Darren won at St George's, he walked off twice in practice because he couldn't play. You know, it was unbelievable. He wouldn't put on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday he played with Schwartzel, McIlroy, and Hurstage. And he was late coming. He was slow off the tee off 14, and they turned round to him and said, "Come on, old man, come and join the major winners up here." And then 4 days later, he won it. And I think you know Darren a little bit. He, on the range on the Sunday afternoon before he played, the wind was whipping 25 miles across left to right down the range. And he was hitting knockdown hybrids, like just flushing it. And he looked around at me and he said, do you know, on a day like this, I'm probably the best player in the world. And I thought, oh, we might not have a problem here today. And we didn't.
So I thought you might say that one. Obviously, you know, having had him on the books for a long time, so it was a great open, and fair play to him. He's third to win a major for all he'd done in golf and everything that had gone on previously. So moving on from that leads into the last question. The 150th Open, obviously this year at St Andrews, which will be a fantastic event. And talking about social media, you see all the stuff's already going up and everything. Who's your tip for that, or who would you like to win it, apart from Darren?
I think it'd be a good course for Tiger.
Can he win it?
Well, I think Tiger can win again. Yeah, I think what he did that first day at the Masters was just absolutely unbelievable watching. I didn't move for 5 hours. I did not move. It was just fantastic to see him plotting his way around and getting around on willpower only. Who's going to win? It'll be somebody that knows the place pretty good. It'll be somebody that's long. You got to be long to win it, St Andrews, because you take a lot of you know what it's like. You take a lot of the tracks out of play, and it depends on the weather. I mean, you know, if we have a windy day, it'll be different. Windy 4 days, it'll be a different winner to somebody that'll play well in flat calm. So I don't know. I'm not very good at tipping golf.
I was going to say
one of the best things that ever happened to Rob was about 5 years ago. They stopped people like us betting on golf.
Yeah.
And I don't bet on golf, no matter what anybody thinks. And it saves me a fortune because I am not as clever as I think I am.
It's not an easy thing to predict, but you can't end by sitting on the fence in a way like that. I asked you who you think is going to win the Open, so come on. Give us a name. Who would you like to see win the Open?
Who would I like to see?
Yeah,
I'd like to see. That's another hard question. No, mine's blank. I don't think like that. I'm not. There's nobody I'd like to see.
I'd like to see Tiger win it. I think it would be an amazing feat.
Listen, I'd like to see Tiger win, and I think Tiger now is being appreciated for his career more than he was when he was doing it. But you know, if you're talking about the new lads coming along, Morikawa is going to win a load of majors. Whether he's going to win at St Andrews or not, I don't know. And I'll tell you another person who's got a great chance at St Andrews is Rory. Rory's sling hook works pretty good around St Andrews. And if he plays normal Rory golf rather than trying to hold it up and cut it, he had a month where he was trying to cut it. It looked terrible. Didn't look right. But he's gone back to playing the way. And I think Bob Rotell's working with him and he's enjoying it again, which is great. And I think, you know, he'd be a very, very good winner.
Because
we got there in the end.
Yeah, well, it's actually it's a very, very valid point because St Andrews clearly suits someone really who can turn it right to left, doesn't it?
Yeah, and hit it far.
Yeah, a long hitter who can turn it right to left. As you say, you're taking a lot of the trouble out of play, aren't you?
Yeah, and strangely, you've got to be able to putt really well from 40 yards.
Yeah.
Because you use the putter all over the place.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes it. You know, I think it's such a great course. You have to have so many shots in the bag, especially as you say if it gets windy.
Yeah. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun, whatever. I've never known them build the Open up like they have this time.
No, it'll be a great event. And to be fair to the R&A, certainly in the last 10 or 15 years, they run great events now, even for like the Boys Championship and all the other events they do, not just the Open. I think every credit to the R&A. They run brilliant events.
Yeah, they do. The only trouble is 290,000 people over the week. Nobody can see it St Andrews to start with.
No, even if you get 29 people, but there you go. It's one of those things. It'll be a great thing to actually be at the Open. You'll be able to look. People will be able to look back. So I was there for the 150th one.
Yeah.
So
they built it up well.
Yeah. So all right, Chub. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, mate. It's been brilliant to talk to you again, and we'll be in touch and maybe catch up at the Open.
All right. Been great. Thanks, Gerald.
Thanks, Chubby. See you, mate.
Good luck.
Bye.
Bye-bye.